Good afternoon, and let's start with the second part of the workshop. As you can see on the slide, yesterday we talked about pre-submission, which was mostly related to how we can plan for and prepare our manuscripts for submission to the journals. And we talked about either review papers or empirical, papers and different sections. We talked about the functions of each section and the required language and terminology that we can use in order to, do that. And let me turn on my camera so that you can see me. Okay. So the first thing that we will be discussing today is sending the manuscript to the journal through the submission system, Scholar One, or Editorial Manager, or other systems, sometimes through emails. But as I understand it, and my colleagues will perhaps confirm that, is that most of the journals nowadays have gone online in terms of submission and the whole review process, and they use a program called the Scholar One, which, as I understand it, is created by Web of Science, and I have actually created a link to show you how it looks like. Um, Through Scholar One, we as authors are able to submit our articles, and this program facilitates journals' peer review activity because there is a process after we submit, our manuscripts. The editors usually make a decision, the first decision, and the editorial office, especially they check with the with the outer guidelines and to see if everything actually aligns with their requirements. And this is what Dr. Rima will talk about, the compliance part. If the Office of Editors or editorial office um, checks and finds out that the manuscript can go forward, then the editor decides about reviewers. And then once they choose the reviewers, they actually um, send the manuscript to at least two reviewers. And most of the journals have a double blind review policy. A double blind review policy means that neither the reviewers nor the authors know each other. So the author will be, obscure to the reviewers, and the reviewers will be unknown to the author as well. And this helps to the, soundness of the review process. Therefore, the expectation is that there is no bias actually when reviewing papers and manuscripts from different authors. And this is why that when you want to submit your article, journals usually request contributors and authors to get rid of any self-citation in the first and initial, submission stages. Again, this is to ensure that the reviewers do not know the identity of the authors and the contributors. And what we do is that usually we use the word author instead of our names. Once the paper gets reviewed by reviewers and the final decision is made by the editors, if it is acceptance, then at that stage, you will be required to complete the citation to your works as well. Now, all of these actually are done through a Scholar One. So let's go to a Scholar One and see how it looks like, so that at least you have an idea of how Scholar One might actually look like. But it seems that okay, yeah, the link now works, and okay, so I can close this one. Do you see my screen now? The Scholar One screen?
No.
No. Okay.
Actually, we do. I do see it.
You do now?
I see the PowerPoint. Are you?
No, not the PowerPoint.
Oh, so it's just the PowerPoint.
Okay, so what I do in it is perhaps stop sharing and then go to share again, and this time go to, okay. You should now see the video library.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So if you search for a Scholar One manuscript, of course, I have already provided the link in the PowerPoint, and when we upload the PowerPoint in our Aware website, you will be able to use the link. But for the time being, this is where we have some explanation about Scholar One and author support, and some questions about your manuscript status that you can check when you submit your manuscript. But one important thing is author guide. You can download an author guide and find out about how to upload your manuscript in Scholar One in case that the journal requires you to submit your paper through Scholar One. Let me run the video perhaps for some minutes so that we see what the Scholar One is all about. Do you have the voice of the video?
No.
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 Oh, really? Okay, so this is where I don't know what should I do in order to help with the voice. But anyways, so perhaps I just move, the ruler and show you the things that we can see in a Scholar One. So basically, when journals provide a link to a Scholar One, then you need to log in if you do not have an account. Therefore, you can create an account in a Scholar One. And then once you have an account, then you can go through it and submit your paper, start new submission. So you begin submission. And the good thing that it's user friendly, and therefore it helps you to go through different stages and steps of uploading, your manuscript. And not only the manuscript, but also the cover letter that Dr. Rima will be talking about, and any other documents that you might be required to upload in the Scholar One, program. Since I have provided the link, so it's possible for you to go through it and learn about Scholar One at your leisure time, and learn about Scholar One and how it is possible to use it in order to submit your manuscripts. This is a very handy and user friendly, as I mentioned, and Therefore, this is why that many journals nowadays use a Scholar One in order not only for the authors to submit their papers, but also once the paper is uploaded, they can very easily send it to reviewers, and then when we receive invitation from journals to review the papers, we go through a Scholar One and we can download the paper and read it and provide comments, and finally complete an evaluation form, rating the paper according to different sections and providing the final judgment whether the paper is publishable as it is, or whether it needs major revisions, or whether it needs minor revisions, or we have to reject it. And in any of these cases, major revisions, minor revisions, and rejection, we will discuss it in part 3 and part 4 of the workshop as how we should deal with any of these decisions that we make from the editors. So for this section, all you need to know, of course, some of the journals might not use a Scholar One, but to my understanding, more and more journals are using a Scholar One as a system for the submission and review of the papers. So you need to familiarize yourself with a Scholar One. And as I mentioned before, once the PowerPoints are uploaded, then you can check the link and create an account, so it's ready for future submission of the programs. And again, as we saw on the site, there is a PDF author file that you can download and go through and make yourself familiar with different steps and stages of submitting your paper. Now, the next item that I will be discussing about is choosing the right journal. We are now living in an information age, as it is said, and one of the indices of information age is the number of journals available, on any particular in any particular discipline, academic discipline. There are many journals, especially nowadays, that not only we have very established journals, but also we have got open access journals, which you have to pay a publication fee. And also we have got some predatory journals, and therefore we need to be careful not to submit our papers to journals that are fake. And so these are the things that we need to consider. So when we talk about choosing the right journal, we are thinking, the major reasons for not being trapped in some of the journals that we did not intend actually to submit. Now, one of the important, once we make sure that we have chosen the right journal, I mean not a fake journal, the one that we can submit our papers to, one of the reasons that usually papers get, desk rejection, it is called desk rejection by journals or journal editors, is because it is out of the scope of the journal, and therefore we have not chosen the right journal. This means that the editors send back the paper to you as the authors, rather than continuing with sending it to reviewers. So this is another point to consider. So the first point to consider in choosing the right journal is to make sure that the journal is an established one and is a reliable journal, and it's not a fake or predatory type of journal. And number 2 is that we make sure that the paper is within the scope of the journal. And this implies that we need to read guide to contributors, very carefully, and also usually journals, when we go to their site, they have aims and a scope of the journal, and therefore check if they are right for the manuscript that we are going to send the paper to. So as someone new to academic publishing, you need to ensure that you choose a journal with a scope that covers your paper, and we will find out how that's possible. The other point is that think of journals as discourse communities. In defining discourse community, John Swales, which I referred to yesterday, says that a discourse community is a community of like-minded people, a group of people that they are interested in the same area of research. They usually excited about same research problems, and they usually use similar research methodologies in order to investigate, the research problems. So because of this, and one of the reasons that I said before, that there are many, many journals, is that as we have moved ahead in time, we have become more specialized. So because there are now many areas of specialization in any area, including humanities and social sciences, so this is natural in a sense to have different journals. And we need to find a discourse community for ourselves, to which discourse community we belong, and therefore this will lead us in choosing appropriate and relevant journal. The implication is that we need to choose a journal that has the same interests and the same topic areas as what we have been working on, and therefore a good venue for the dissemination of knowledge through the paper and manuscript that we submit. So this is another point that we need to consider. So the first one was to make sure that the journal is not a fake one, is not a predatory one. The second one was to make sure that our paper fits the scope of the journal, and the third one is after we make sure that the broad area is relevant, see if within that broad area and scope there are specialized journals that can fit with our our paper and manuscript that we are submitting. There are different types of journals. Some of these journals are devoted to publishing review papers. So again, if I want to speak to our PhD students, again, this does not exclude our master's students, because I'm sure that they also produce very relevant and interesting assignments on some topics, and they usually do reviews, and therefore they can consider some of these journals for sending their review papers. These review journals usually have the word review in their title. So for example, sociological review, for example, or review of something, some words that come. And when we see the word review, so for example, we have got applied linguistics review, or similar journals that they have the word review in their title, they are exclusively publishing review papers, and therefore it's a good idea to consider those papers. However, it is possible actually to send review papers to other journals as well, because although the other journals are not exclusively publishing review papers, but usually in the scope of their journal and in the aims and guidelines, they identify that they also accept, review papers. So one type of journals in any discipline, including humanities and social sciences, are review journals, and therefore, if we want to find some of these review journals, we can just search in Google and put, for example, a review in humanities and social sciences, and then we can come up with some of the journals. But also we can learn from our friends, our more experienced colleagues like supervisors, and also maybe aware can be helpful in this regard as well. The second type of journals are journals specialized on a specific topic. Although the broad scope of the journal is related to humanities and social sciences, but they might focus on one particular area, and therefore they might focus on human crisis. They might focus on poverty. They might focus on some of the challenges that human beings actually are facing, and so these are considered as specialized journals because they just accept and publish papers that are in the exact area of specialization. Contrary to specialized journals are those journals with a broader scope. So, for example, I have put International Journal of Humanities and Social Sciences. As you can see, journals like this one publish anything related to humanities and social sciences, and therefore you might consider, these journals as the venue for your manuscripts as well. And finally, there are some other journals that focus on methodology. And one example is Journal of Mixed Methods. So the main criterion of this of journals like the Journal of Mixed Methods is whether the methodology that researchers have used is mixed methods or not. If yes, then it doesn't matter which discipline they come from, and this is why that these journals, usually methodological journals and journals with broader scope and review journals, actually get higher impact factor, which is something that we need to consider when we want to shortlist and choose a journal to send our articles with. So any empirical study which is done in any discipline, in, for example, health and medical sciences, in engineering, in sciences, in humanities, in social sciences, in agriculture, that has used mixed methods is eligible for publication in the Journal of Mixed Methods. Now, the implication of this is that if you have used mixed methods in a particular way that embraces different data sources and different types of analysis that you have carried out, and especially you have integrated the outcomes of quantitative and qualitative analysis in an innovative way, then certainly Journal of Mixed Methods Research is a great place to submit your article. Now, so another decision that we can make at the stage of choosing the right journal is whether our paper is a review paper or whether it is an empirical paper. If it is a review paper, then the preference should be to send it to a review journal that publishes only review papers. If it is an empirical study, then we need to decide whether we would like to send it to a journal with a specific focus, or whether we will prefer to send it to a journal with a broader scope. Now, I would say that sometimes actually it is possible to produce more than one paper from our research, and therefore consider different journals. And this is what more experienced researchers usually do. So, for example, if I'm doing a research project, I would change the literature review section of the paper into a review paper and submit it to a review journal. And then I might take part of the data and analyze it in a particular way and submit it to a specialized, journal. And then if my research methodology is unique in one way or another, I would focus and concentrate on the methodological aspects and just showcase how I have used this, new methodology and elaborate on that and explain it, and then submit it to a methodological, journal as well. So that's a potential and a possibility that we can consider when we do a research project. And if we have that in mind, then from the very beginning, we can actually think about all these, potentialities, and therefore think about different types of papers. This is very important, especially for students, early career, researchers. If they know in advance, then they can plan for it and therefore get prepared for 2 or 3 papers that they can submit to different journals. In addition to these, general tips and general, strategies that we can use, there are also some more specific, tips that have been put forth by more experienced researchers. I would recommend and urge you to subscribe to Pat Thompson. She is a prolific writer, and she has experience supervising PhD students, and therefore she has created a blog that when you subscribe to her blog, then you will receive notification about her, new writings on different aspects of, research and writing, especially, PhD thesis. So I have provided, again, a link to this particular article that because I'm subscribed to her blog, so anytime that she produces something new, I will receive a notification and I go through it very quickly. And then it's beneficial for us as supervisors to learn from more experienced, actually, researchers and supervisors. But also, I'm sure that you will find most of her postings very relevant and useful, and you can check past postings as well. So occasionally she talks about, different aspects of research and writing. She has talked about, for example, the structure and organization of, papers. She has talked about even, how paragraphs in a paper should be organized. She has talked about how to write introductions. She has written about how to write conclusions. So many topics she has addressed, and as I mentioned, she is very prolific and therefore produces very, interesting pieces. So the first tip to you is to get subscribed to Pat Thompson's, blog, so that not only you can read her past writings on topics of relevance to you and, your thesis and projects, but also for future, whenever she publishes something new, you will be notified. Now, one of her postings that I have provided the link here is 5 clues to choosing the right journal. As you can see here, she recommends, of course, there is a full-length, blog that you can later on check, but I just, draw your attention to these 5, items. Number 1, ask yourself what journal communities you are already part of. If you remember, I referred to discourse communities. So this is, in a sense, another way of, talking about this course community. As researchers, we are usually subscribed to some, journal table of contents, so that as soon as a new issue of the journal is out, or even nowadays it is called, first online articles, that as soon as they accept an article, then we have access to it. So one good tip is that the journals that we have been using in order to, read the articles, again, for our PhD students, but also for our master's students, I'm sure that you have been using some journals for your assignments, to download articles from journals for your qualifying exam, for your candidacy exam, and for your literature review. So it's a good idea to have a list of those journals that you regularly use and you associate with those journals, because they have published articles that relate to your field. And so that's a very good, potential venue for you to consider one of those journals for publication. So that's journal community. The second tip that Pat Thompson puts forward is check out the editors and editorial boards. Each journal has one or two editor-in-chief who are responsible for handling all the submissions and review process and making final decisions. But each journal also has a list of editorial board. These editorial boards are usually invited to review papers that have been submitted to that journal. And so when you check the editors and editorial boards, and you can click on the link, you can find out about their background, and you can learn about their profiles, their areas of interest and specialization. And therefore this is another good reference for us to decide whether we should submit to this journal or not. If all the editors and editorial boards are alien to us, we don't have read anything from these, or the area of specialization actually do not intersect with others, then perhaps that journal needs to be considered. The third tip suggested by Pat Thompson is get expert advice. And this is very important, because once, or at this stage that you want to submit a paper to a journal, it is within the HBKU policy that you need to choose the journals that are approved by your college. And in the college, the best people are your advisors and supervisors. So you need to consult your advisors and supervisors as expert people, and get expert advice from them, whether they recommend submitting to this journal or not. Sometimes you might come across, very good journal, but your supervisors do not recommend because they have experience with that journal, and they know that the reviewing process is very lengthy. And so it's good always to consult, more expert people, and particularly, our supervisors. The fourth is investigate the journal community. Again, actually, this relates to who have submitted to this, journals. So although the editors and editorial boards might not be familiar to us, but we can see that we have been able to, download some of the articles published in these journals, and therefore the community of writers, so the community of the authors and contributors to this journal are relevant to our field of study, and therefore they could be shortlisted as potential journals. And the fifth one is decode the journal conversation. So even if the journal community, the contributors are not familiar to us, but again, the articles itself, the topic communicated through the papers and articles, the conversation that's taking place in the journal can help us to decide whether we consider the journal as a good place for us to submit or not. In addition to these, I have also chosen and copied from Wiley. As you know, Wiley is one of the famous publishers. So we have Elsevier, we have Sage, we have Wiley, and we have Routledge, and we have Equinox, for example. We have many publishing centers and publishing houses. These publishing houses not only publish books, but also they have quite a high number of journals in different areas, including humanities and social sciences. And therefore, this is just one example. I'm sure that if you go to Sage, you will see, similar information and tips. If you go to Routledge, again, you will see, similar things. But because I found this more relevant to our discussion today, Wiley suggests 6 steps for choosing an appropriate journal. And as you will see, there are some overlaps with what Pat Thompson actually was recommending as well. So the first actually step is to ask this question: what is the most important for you? This was absent from the 5 tips in the previous slide. So you need to ask yourself a question: what is important for you? Factors like journal metrics. What is journal metrics? Journals are known by an index which is called impact factor. And simply stated, the higher the impact factor, the more valid the journal is, and therefore more prestigious. Again, I can remember that in the document that Owen has kindly, shared on Aware, and you should have access to. Prestige of journals is one of the factors that we need to consider when we submit, our picks. However, I have a reservation here that do not be too ambitious, especially for early submissions. The important thing for you is to get published. The more you publish, then you can, go for higher impact factors. But for initial ones, just, consult with your supervisors and choose a modest journal, which while it is not a predatory, journal, and it's not a fake journal, but it might not have, a high impact factor. Personally, and based on my observation, impact factor for some disciplines like sciences and engineering, and even for medical sciences, usually is high. We even have journals with an impact factor of 15 or even more. But in humanities and social sciences, I would say a journal with an impact factor of 3 is considered as a high impact factor and a prestigious, journal. So you should aim journals around 1, an impact factor of 1, which is not, too ambitious to publish it. So this is something to consider, and so this is the way that we respond to this question: what is most important for me at this stage? Not, aiming at very high impact factor journals. Rather, I will be considering more modest, journals with even lower, impact factors. The second point is whether you are seeking a broad audience or a specialized audience. This is what was in the previous slide, that again, based on the content of your paper, And I would add the review as well, because we said that there are some journals that publish review papers. So depending on the content and the scope of your paper, you need to decide whether to send it to a review journal or to a broad audience journal or to a specialized audience, and what is important for you. And the next point is journals network, including society or association affiliations and editorial board and members. Again, this is what we discussed. If you are already a member of one of the academic associations, then you might consider actually a journal that is published by that association. The second step that we need to go through in order to choose a right journal is to go to your library or browse publishers' websites. So you're aware of the range of available journals. Wiley, if you click later on this link, actually you will find an alphabetical list of the journals published by Wiley, and you can just search using some keywords, and you can come across or shortlist some of the journals that you would consider to send your manuscripts to. A similar link exists from other publishers, as I mentioned before, and so you can check that as well. Yeah, and you could also try Wiley's Journal Finder. So if you know a journal that is published by Wiley, you can just type in the search box, and then you will be taken to the journal site to read all about the scope and the aims, and also find the guide to the contributors. The next step is to consider the journals that you read, and again, this relates to the discourse community, as well as the journal community that I explained in the previous slide. And could one of these be appropriate for your work, because you are already familiar with some journals that you have used in your assignments as well as in your qualifying exam and candidacy exam. So you might consider one or two of those journals as potential venue for publishing your papers. And the fourth one is ask a supervisor. Again, this is expert advice that we had in the previous slide for recommendations. And even if you're co-authoring the paper with other people outside the department or the college, you can seek their advice in addition to your supervisors as well. And number 5, once you have listed several possible choices, you have shortlisted, for example, 5 journals, review each journal aims and scope. Even if you are familiar with the journal, it's always important to check the scope and the aim of the journal, not to get desk rejection. And then number 6, as you narrow your choices, read the author guidelines. This is what I discussed yesterday, that each journal has author guidelines, or a guide to contributors, or a guide to authors. And there are very, very useful information in those guidelines about the structure of the article that you need to submit, about the writing style preference, which writing style they prefer, and therefore you need to accommodate that. And also about the word limit for abstract for the whole article. Many useful pieces of information that is something that Dr. Rima is now going to talk about, how as authors actually we would comply with the guide to authors. So I stop at this stage and I pass over to Dr. Rima. As I mentioned yesterday, today Dr. Rima is going to cover 2 topics. One is related to submission checklist, including the compliance with the author. Dr. Rima, up to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Riazi. Would you like to stop sharing so that I share mine?
Okay, so I stop sharing and then you can stop yours.
Can everyone see my slides?
I can.
Okay. Okay. So to carry on this part, we would like here to discuss the submission checklist, including the compliance with the author guidelines. And before we delve into the author guideline checklist, I would like to remind everyone, whether it's first author or not, to create two very useful accounts for authors. One of them is called Google Scholar. I think that we are all familiar with it. And the other one is the ORCID or ORCID. So for Google Scholar, we can simply create a Google Scholar account when we have an account with Google through our Gmail, basically. And that is very useful for tracking the citation. And it's, first of all, free of a charge. And to document all our articles or contributions in books as a DOI or identifier for the document. So Google can or Google Scholar can retrieve that based on your name. And since in the last 10 years, many authors have identical names, especially from China or East Asia.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Rima. I'm sorry. Could you please use a slideshow and make the screen bigger for the audience?
Okay. Okay. That's better. Is it better now?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So as we mentioned, Google Scholar can be enough, but it's much better to create another unique account that is called ORCID. So the ORCID was created basically in 2012, and it has very growing community, and many publishers now, by the way, do not accept your publication, or the submission process doesn't get approved or completed if you don't link it from the beginning with your ORCID number or ORCID account. So this identifying account is unique for each scholar in the world. It's like your fingerprint. So whether you have any similarity in the name with other authors, Google Scholar does not identify. So when you Google a name of an author, for example, or a researcher, many authors and accounts can be retrieved if they are similar in terms of names. But the ORCID is very unique, and that is why it's highly recommended, highly linked with any submission system. The other thing is that for ORCID to be created, it's always preferred that you use your very similar or very repeated name of yours. I always, for example, give, for instance, how we would like our name to be displayed. Maybe for my name, I can choose to have it Rima Jamal Seifan. Maybe I have it Rima J Seifan. Maybe I have it Rima Seifan. However, it's always preferred on your publication to follow one or use one of the name styles or name format of your own self, so that it doesn't get, mixed with other names, especially if we have similarity in family names with other researchers globally. So that is something that it's always advised to follow. When you write your name on any publication, just choose a style or format for your name that you want to use for every scholarly output, whether it is a paper, conference, or book, anything academic or scholar. Just choose the same format of your name. That's much preferable for Google Scholar. However, for ORCID, it will always be identified by your number rather than your name. So going back to instructions to authors, as Dr. Riazi has said, there is 2 steps for rejection. The desk rejection, which is based, as Dr. Riazi mentioned, on not being able to meet the scope or aim of the journal. And that is one major mistake we do when we submit our article for a journal, not being able to choose the right one. However, you might choose the right one in terms of aims and scope, but you don't follow the instructions to authors. And here comes a very quick rejection for you just because you didn't comply with the instructions to authors guidelines. So a tip for that, whenever you intend to submit your paper for a certain journal, after discussing it with your supervisor, as Professor Riazi has suggested, because it's always, like much better than you go through it alone. So suppose you agree to have to submit it to XY journal, just start by reading the author's guidelines so that if they have a certain format, a certain requirement, you do it from the beginning rather than finalizing the manuscript and then redoing the format all over again. That will ultimately save a lot of time and makes it, in terms of connectivity, much more logical. However, sometimes the author's guideline specify, for example, headings and subheadings that are not preferred in your research area. So that would you also would draw your attention that, oh, this journal is not the best for this type of article. We can maybe use it for another submission later. But for this, for example, type of paper that you are writing, a lot of things are required, but you cannot do it, or the opposite. You have to mention a lot of things, but they are not preferred to be added up according to the author guidelines. However, the author guideline goes beyond that. So it starts nowadays with the word and character limit. Why? Because for publishing, there's always a hidden cost, whether it is open access and you have to pay the article processing charges, or it is open access and free, or it is subscribed ones. So the word and character limit, it's not only to make your writing, like niche and straight to the point to avoid redundancy, etc. It's always, again, to save costs for the publishing process. So publishers tend to reject lengthy articles or redundant references because it, again, costs them a lot, while doesn't affect, the quality of the work. So it's always important to make sure that you adhere to the word and character limit. And again, the systems like Editorial Manager, for example, I think Scholar One the same, would not allow you to continue the submission if you exceed with 1 character per section. Another important point for the submitting checklist is that you have the required sections completed and numbered or classified as per the journal guideline. So some journals would like you to use 1 point, for example, introduction. One would like it without the numbering. One would like it with certain subheadings, including, for example, for methodology, the research area, or statistical details. However, some journals would like it to be in 1 section without subheadings. So that are all unique per journals, and you have to follow it in terms to be, in good position for passing to peer review, rather than being rejected for just, like classifying the work in the required section headings as per the requirements. Another issue is the language. A lot of papers are rejected for language, not only because they don't comply with US or UK English, or they have mixed, spelling format. It's always because it wasn't, proofread. And for many journals, they don't have the, let me call it, free editing services like before, many years ago. They had this service to be offered within, and now again, for cost issues, they can always direct you for paid services, and sometimes they just reject it because they don't have the service and they don't like, the language issues in the manuscript. So this is another thing to be careful to review and proofread many times before submission. A lot of other issues related to figures and tables. Some journals would like you to embed the tables and figures within the text. Some, they would like you to put it at the end. And some, they would like you not to put it with the Word document. They want you to attach it one by one with high resolution in a different section. So again, this is something that we cannot guess. It is written in the author's guideline, and we have to follow it. Recently, a lot of sections have been added and been mandatory, like the conflict of interest, like the funding source, like the author contribution. So what has each author contributed to in order to qualify to be added to the author list? A lot of things that you have to review and make sure that you adhere to based on the author checklist before submission. So now when we are ready to submit and we think that we followed all the instructions for the author's guideline, we need to prepare something called a cover letter that is very primitive and very important for the first also feedback from the editor before passing it to peer reviewer. So sometimes this letter is required as an attachment. Sometimes it is there's a section or a box where you can just copy paste what you have in a Word document and put it there. However, it is 90% of the time mandatory. And actually, if it's not mandatory, it's always preferred for you to prepare it. Why? Because the cover letter is like the first selling point for your manuscript. You are telling the author, aside from the, the title and who are the authors, because it's always in the system when you submit, you want to highlight the main aim of your work and why it is suitable for this journal. Why did you choose this journal and why they should accept you or pass it to peer review? What is the added value? Who might be the possible readers? So you would like the journal to give a priority for your submission over many other submissions to pass to peer review at that stage. And this is how the cover letter should be written. It intends to make your work very attractive, to give it the value it deserves, to highlight the main achievements that makes it, stand out compared to many other submissions that might be similar in content or even in title. So it's very short, it's concise. It majorly comes from the very well written abstract, by the way. So if you have written a good abstract for your paper, your cover letter, the main body of it should just, extract the main points and highlight the value of it, rather than, like writing something just general and, reiterating what you can verbally say. It should be very concise and very direct, and it should be very attractive to pass to the peer review stage. Many journals, again, there are a lot of changes nowadays, but recently there has been a section devoted for suggesting peer reviewers. As Professor Riazi has mentioned, most journals, the reputable one, they do double blind peer review. What does that mean? It means that you don't know who are the reviewers, and the reviewers don't know you in terms of names. But however, they might choose reviewers that in your, for example, discipline, and they have to declare that they have no conflict of interest with you. What is the conflict of interest? It has many definitions, but in scholar publishing, it can mean, for example, an expert that you didn't, for example, collaborate with in the past 5 years, an expert you didn't co-author any article with him or her for the past 5 years. It can be somebody who didn't fund your work, somebody who is, for example, outside your institution, preferably. And that makes the mission very complicated when we want to suggest reviewers who we don't know, they don't know us, and they are experts. And again, they are willing to review our work free of charge, etc., etc. So when you are in that position that you cannot suggest the 3 to 5 peer reviewers as per the submission system, because again, this is not something that is optional, it is obligatory, and the submission will not continue before doing this. So what we recommend is that you go down to the list of references that you cited, and you choose 3 to 5 experts where they have their names and like affiliation clear, especially adding the emails because it should be added. And then you have them, and here you are sure that you don't have any conflict of interest because you don't know them, they don't know you. And in that case, the journal is free whether they want to choose from the list you provided or not, but then you did your job and you did it perfectly in that case. So again, that would avoid delaying your work or using names that might create conflict of interest, and you will be, like ethically approved. So yeah, up to this point, I think I will give back the lead to Dr. Riazi to round up our part 1 and 2 for the training yesterday and today, or the workshop. So Dr. Riazi, you want me to continue moving the slides and you just summarize the output?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Rima. As a roundup of the 2 parts that we discussed yesterday and today, some of the take-home messages. So before submission, we have covered before submission and submission parts. And then hopefully in near future, by near future, I mean 2023, we will be, presenting on the other 2 parts, which is post-submission and dealing with the feedback and comments that we receive from the reviewers as well as, from editors. So what we covered on before submission, we talked about the type of article that we are submitting to the journals. As you remember, we had a variety of, articles that you can submit to journals. My recommendation was that immediately after this workshop, start to plan for and think about reviewing a book and publishing your book review in one of the journals if you have not already done that. That's a very good place to start with, because once you get your review published in a journal, that motivates you for the future publications, as well as it makes you familiar with the whole process of preparing, submitting, revising, the articles in the journals. So again, I re-emphasize that you choose one of the books that you have been, reading, either as one of the required course, textbooks, or one of the sources for your qualifying exam, or for master's students, one of the books that they have been reading related to their topics. and check some of the published book reviews in the journals to make yourself familiar with the structure of, the book reviews. The other type of the articles that we discussed were review papers. And we said that there are different types of review papers. If you remember, I mentioned actually meta-analysis. I mentioned literature review or review papers. I mentioned the state-of-the-art, articles. We just focused on, review papers. And we mentioned that that's a possibility for publishing review papers, but mostly we covered empirical articles, and by empirical articles we said that those articles that are the outcome of the research project that we have carried out, and we have collected first-hand data and have done some sort of analysis, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods. So these are potential type of articles that we can keep in mind and work on them and get published. The other section that we covered yesterday was how to write each section of the article. Again, the take-home message is that remember that each section in an article has a function, and we need to familiarize ourselves with the function of that particular section and use appropriate structure as well as relevant terminology and words in order to write that particular section in the article. And also we talked about particular Dr. Rima exposed us to Mendeley as one of the organizing software programs that is very helpful. And so you can keep a record of the articles. And the good thing about Mendeley, as Dr. Rima mentioned, is that it is possible to create folders. And so for each research project you can have a folder in that you keep all the relevant articles. Software programs like Mendeley can, and there is all in the end note that you might be familiar with, and other software programs. But the good thing about these software programs is that they can help us with writing papers, review papers, or empirical articles, and they can help us with within text citations, as well as the final references that we need to provide at the end of the articles. The good thing is that they can automatically produce the bibliography or the references for the articles. Another advantage of these software programs is that they have actually different writing styles. And so depending on the journals, one of the things that you need to check with the journals is to find out what writing style they prefer and they request authors to use. And so these software programs have APA, have Chicago style, have MLA, and other writing styles, and therefore they can help us with this, which otherwise it would be a difficult task and a difficult job to do. Today, actually, we focused on submission stage in the process of getting published. The first thing that we discussed was familiarity with a article management program, which is called ScholarOne. The reason we discussed that is that most journals are using ScholarOne nowadays for article submission as well as review process. So everything actually will be handled through ScholarOne, and more journals are subscribing to ScholarOne and using it as a submission program. The other topic that we discussed today was choosing the right journal. It's very important because a high percentage, relatively high percentage of desk rejection is that usually journal editors or the office of the editors get back to the authors and say that we are sorry, this article does not fit within the scope of our journal. This is one reason, and the other reason, as we mentioned actually, or was within the 5 or 6 tips that were provided by Pat Thompson as well as Wiley, is what we expect from our submission, and therefore choosing the right journal to submit. There were other tips or steps that we need to go through in order to choose the right journal, including consultation with more expert people, in particular supervisors, as well as the nature and the type of the paper that we'd like to submit. And then we shifted to compliance with the journal requirements, and we said that each journal usually has note to contributors, and therefore we need to read them very carefully to make sure that we abide by the conventions that they have set up, and therefore check the list that they require us to follow. This includes not only the overall structure of the paper and the word limit, but also the writing style that they prefer, and any other aspects. And finally, we covered the topic, in particular, Dr. Rima talked about cover letter. I think this is also very important because it's very true that editors can read the abstract or the title and make a decision whether they would like to forward the article to the reviewers or not. But the cover letter can bring to the editor's attention the significance of the paper. What is significant about the paper, and why do you think actually the journal that you have chosen is a good venue to publish your paper. So you need to make some highlights in your cover letter to the editors and convince them and persuade them about the significance of your paper and how your paper contributes to the scope of the journal. So it would be wise to even copy and paste some sentences in the goals of the journal or a scope of the journal, although you need to reward that and say how your paper corresponds to the goals of the journal. So I think these are the main points that we would like to share with you before submission and then submission. And hopefully you come up with some ideas to plan your publication journey. And as it's very obvious, it's a process. And therefore you need to think about different stages and create a plan for yourself. And every now and then you can check your progress as where you are in the process. I now open up the question section for you to raise any questions that you might have, so that Dr. Rima and myself can answer your questions. And then after we finish today's session, then we can wait for the next 2 parts to be covered in the future. Yes, go ahead, please, with any questions that you might have.
So before I forget, reference to that question that we received yesterday about Mendeley and its use in Arabic or other languages. So I checked and they are enabling that. So I think they started doing this in 2020 based on maybe authors' requests. So it's not only available in Arabic, it's available to be, you know, using the citation for different languages, especially those that start the writing from right to left, like ours. So yeah, it's available, and there's a YouTube that shows how it's done, and there's a section on their website to show you also how to switch for the language of your preference. I hope I answered the question that was, you know, raised yesterday about.
Thank you, Dr. Rima. That's good news for those of you who were concerned about whether it is possible to use Mendeley with other languages or not. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Mahdi, Dr. Rima. Thank you for the amazing workshop. We benefit a lot from it, and it is a great workshop to have. I have one question regarding the name of that I will be using in my articles. I have only one publishing paper, which is my MA, and it is published in Google Scholar, and they already have the name NAB Al Sayed. So do I have to use the same that they been using, because it is already there and it's already I didn't choose it, they chose it for me when they published the paper of my MA. So to have
Okay, so if it's only one paper and you don't like how it is shown, which is really not not lovely in A, like I know it's Noura. No, we would like to draw your attention whenever, first of all, whenever someone publishes something without you reviewing the naming or anything, without your full consent on how your name is going to be displayed, I think you can always, you know, like raise your hand and say, I don't like my name to be displayed this way. However, if it's already published and it's, you know, like hard for them to change it, then you can from now on follow the naming that you want by reviewing every single submission. And to my surprise, that things like pass like this way, because all publishers, including us in HPQ Press, the first thing we ask the authors in the last stage to review before we raise it online, before we publish the final work online, the first thing we always ask them to do is to review their names and emails properly. Because we are aware that many people or many authors would like to pay attention to the content. So they review the content many times. But you know, typesetters are always humans and they do mistakes. So maybe your name is written or a letter is written like, you know, mistakenly. And then because you assume that, oh, this is my name, I don't have to look at it again, or my email, etc. Many authors miss the opportunity to check, you know, like for sample errors, yet primary errors. I mean, it will always feel, you know, like not right to show our name, not the way we want it to be. So Noura, from now on, please take care when you submit anything. Take care when the submission is accepted and then you are asked to review the paper. It's not only you review the content for any error inside the content, it's always to start from top, bottom, the title, the names, the affiliations, the emails, the addresses, etc. So yeah, from now on, you don't have to follow that name the way it was written. You can create you know, like assure yourself that I would like to my name to be displayed this way, and make sure that it appears the same in every submission now and in the future.
Okay, Doctor, thank you very much. And I have another question regarding the name also. You know that a lot of people have similar names, and I think one of the issue that they presented my name like that is there is two already scholars, they present their name as N. Al Sayed. So do I have to present my first name as a letter, or can I ask to present it as a whole?
It's always preferred to have your first name presented as the first name, as Noura. And now I can see, for example, you have double O in your name, which is sometimes it's mostly Noura, like
with OU.
You see how unique it is. Exactly, or an OU. So you see how unique it is for each one of us. like me, Rima, it can be R-I-M-A, one E, double E, etc. Some people add an H at the end, like Rima. So again, but fortunately, my name is never doubled around the world. So even in other databases, my family name distinguish me like really unique, but this is not the case, especially for East Asian countries. Many family names, are the same exactly, and even the first name. So our seeds came here to make us all unique. So from now on, a Google Scholar will count on your, like extracting your abstracts or contributions or publications based on your RSeed rather than on your name only. So when you create an RSeed account, make sure, please, as long as Google Scholar account, to use your name, the first name in full, and whatever, how you want to display the rest. For example, you can add the first letter of your father. So that would make it even more unique. So Noura full, for example, A dot, then Al Sayed. You see my point. So the more you choose to have, like your password, the more complicated it is, the less opportunity that it will be repeated, or like somebody else will coincidentally having the same thing.
Great. Yeah, and I don't have anything to add because Dr. Rima's response was comprehensive and covered every aspect. And as she mentioned, especially as you move ahead with more publications, it's important that you have, consistency in your name as, author. And of course, when you create your Google Scholar, again, as it was mentioned, it's a good idea to create an ORCID account, and the ORCID account along with your Google Scholar make your profile unique, and therefore there would be less chances for duplicates of names. Your work for other people or other people's work for you. Right. Thank you for the question, Nora. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much for attending the second part of the workshop, and I hope that we have been able to communicate some of the things that we have come across through, experience, and also researchers, writers ourselves, and hopefully we see your publications in near future, inshallah. So take care, and we will inform you about the next parts when they are ready, and hopefully we will see you again in the future sessions. And I would like to thank you, my colleague, Dr. Rima, for collaborating on this as well, and wish everyone all the best.
Thank you, Professor Riaz. Same to you. Thank you.